right, we're officially being poisoned from literally every angle now. And not only is this negatively affecting us physically, but unfortunately, this is negatively affecting us mentally and definitely spiritually as well. So one thing I've talked a lot about on this channel is gluttony, and that's a topic that not many people want to have, but how common and pervasive gluttony is, in modern society now, and how kind of just accepted it is. And that gluttony doesn't just apply to food, how much food we consume, but it can also apply to, our addictions, being so addicted to cell phones and tech and Netflix and all of that. But outside of gluttony, one thing we need to discuss is what we consume. Literally everything from what we ingest, everything we put in our bodies, to what we see, what we hear. We are literally being poisoned from every angle. Part of this is on purpose, from the quote unquote system. And then some of this, I just believe it's, what's happened with modern society and how society has, progressed throughout time. So first off, on the food front. So outside of gluttony itself and how much we're consuming, and people wanting to throw out the term, have everything in moderation and all of that. What really is moderation? We have to take ourselves back kind of out of, modern history now and think how things used to be, how much less food people used to consume. Outside of the actual amount, we have to pay attention to what's going in our bodies. Everything now is so highly processed. Everything now has poison all over it. Even just our vegetables, have glyphosate sprayed all over them. We need to be very, very conscious of what we're consuming, because Corinthians 10:31 says, so whether we eat or drink or whatever we do for the glory of God. This comes down to, we need to be very diligent with everything we're putting in our bodies. From an amount wise, are we being gluttonous? Are we, just consuming way too much that it's hurting our health and can hurt also our spiritual health? But then also, are we just haphazardly, just eating dirty foods, because we want to, that can be processed foods, or that could be, just eating unhealthy, low quality foods. This is where, with us being in modern history, one thing we have to do now, more so than any humans throughout history, is we need to be very diligent on learning what it means to eat right, and learning how to protect ourselves from these poisons, because literally from every angle, stuff can be damaging. So that's where, choose high quality ingredients, choose single ingredient foods. And then outside of that, learn where the dangers are really lying. Then that comes into, consuming alcohol. The argument, comes down to, well, we can have it in moderation, but, alcohol is a poison to our body. So at what level of consuming poison is it, considered not right? These are all questions we need to ask ourselves. One thing that's very popular right now is nicotine pouches like Zens. People will talk about the health benefits of nicotine, how it's neuroprotective, and it's a good kind of nootropic for better work capacity, all of that. And then people will say that, oh, it's not really that addictive. I, back in the day when I was in the Army, used nicotine. I can say very firsthand, it's addictive. I have many friends now that they would love to quit and are having trouble, getting off nicotine. And so that comes down to, Corinthians 6:12 that said, all things are lawful for me, but not everything is helpful. All things are lawful for me, but I will not be enslaved to anything. So that's kind of a big point of the video I'm making today is, one, we need to be very, very on guard and intentional with everything we're consuming. But then we need to make sure that we are not enslaved to anything that we're consuming. That can be certain foods that we don't want to give up that aren't good for us. That can be, alcohol. That can be nicotine. That could be anything we're consuming. Is the music we're consuming, is it good for our soul? Is it good for our mind? Or is it potentially harmful? Are we addicted to Netflix, and just spending too much time watching movies, TV? What type of movies and TV are we watching? Is it edifying to our soul? Is it hurting our soul? I've talked many times about, our addictions to, being on our phones or, on our computers. We need to make sure we're not enslaved to anything. And this is something that I'm constantly struggling with myself. I'm constantly asking myself, is what I'm consuming, from what I eat to what I see to what I hear, is it good for me or not? And there's many times that I'll realize that something has more of a hold on me than what I would like. And then I have to work on cutting it out. Making sure we're not enslaved to anything. We're not addicted to anything. We can just drop anything at the drop of our hat if we know it's not healthy for our body, our mind, or our soul. And then that's making sure that we are, constantly checking ourselves on everything we're consuming. Because at the end of the day, the way the system's been set up, I think, like I said, I think some of this is intentional. We live in a very kind of satanic system, and a lot of this stuff is intentional to take us further and further and further away from, how God designed us. It's so easy for us to not treat our body as the temple of God, and to remove us from actually serving God, serving other people. We have to always ask ourselves at the end of the day, is everything we're doing, everything we're consuming, is it bringing us closer to loving God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength, and loving others as ourselves? And I can honestly say with my own self, I catch myself all the time on, spending too much time, on, say, watching Netflix, or spending too much time, on Instagram reels. And how dangerous is all of that stuff? Because then you're constantly being, having your mind filled with whatever the algorithm deems you should be watching. And the algorithms are getting smarter and smarter and smarter at entrapping us and enslaving us. So we need to be so on guard with everything we consume, from the food we eat, one, on the amount, us practicing not being gluttonous. I've talked about how this applies to even, those of us into fitness, that we are taught that we need a lot of food, all of that. I've talked many times how that's not always the case, and we can definitely do with having less food. And especially if you are watching what you eat and you're eating very, very high quality foods, you absolutely can eat less food. Your body's going to absorb it better, all of that. But with that, making sure what we're consuming is actually healthy and not filled with literal poisons. Like I've said, there's glyphosate all over everything. There's unhealthy stuff in pretty much everything. The food colorings, all the bad stuff in processed food. People are very haphazardly eating this stuff and not being aware of it. And then some are even aware of it and still doing it. Everything we consume to things we use for our body. I'm going to talk in another video about how, we are moving so far away from a natural world. Now it's either, you choose to kind of push yourself into the natural route of things, or, you go what the world is wanting right now, which is be very, very synthetic. And we'll talk about that in another video. But whole point of this video is we need to be on guard with everything we're consuming, because it absolutely can positively or negatively affect us physically, mentally, and spiritually. And like I said, 1 Corinthians 10:31, so whether you eat and drink or whatever you do for the glory of God. And always be checking yourself on everything you're consuming, from your mouth, your eyes, your ears, everything you're consuming. Is this for the glory of God or not? Is this bringing you closer to God or not? Because we are literally destroying our bodies. We're literally destroying our mind, and we're hurting our soul by not checking ourselves on these constantly. And this is something we all struggle with, myself included. So hopefully this encouraged you today. Just Constantly checking yourself, be very conscientious. We have to do this more so than anybody throughout history. Throughout all of history, you go back, even 1,000 years ago, they didn't have all of these poisons in their foods. They didn't have the music we have. They don't have the tech we have. We have to be more on guard than anybody throughout all of history. But that's just the cards we've been dealt with us being in modern history. We have creature comforts now, but with those creature comforts, we have to be more due diligent on making sure what we're consumed. One, it's not bad stuff we're consuming, and B, we're not enslaved or entrapped to any of it. We're not addicted to any of it. So I hope this encouraged some of y'all out there. If it did, please go ahead and smash that like button, hit subscribe if you haven't already. All glory to God. God bless you. Have a great rest of your day.